Hello and greetings. And I would now like to introduce the next essay that I'm putting out. And this essay is called Is There Life on Earth? A Thought Experiment. And that title also happens to be the title of the book where it comes from, the one that I recently published with a series of essays, what I call the Transmutation Cycle. This book itself being called Is There Life on Earth? The Transmutation Octave. Now, this essay is a life on Earth. It's a thought experiment. So it's entertaining potential perspectives. So, as they say, let me entertain you. And in this essay, I particularly take some ideas from the Greek Armenian mystic philosopher Gurdjieff, George Ivanovich Gurdjieff. And many people will be familiar with Gurdjieff, with the fourth way, as was also expounded by his pupil P.D. Uspensky. For those people not familiar with Gurdjieff, it may be interested to look up some of his teachings. It's perhaps his teachings are more well known now than they were in his lifetime, which was the early to mid 20th century. He died in 1949, so from 1910, 1920 to 1949 was when his teachings were most active through him. Now, primarily what Gurdjieff is saying is that the cosmos in which we exist is a gradient or hierarchy of vibrations. And those vibrations are like a musical octave, a musical scale. They go on an octave of 7/8, and they move down from lesser density to higher density. And within each density, the more dense the vibrations become, the greater the amount of laws that the inhabitants have to live under, i.e., there's less freedom and more constraint. So in the origin, there's the absolute. There's only one law, and that's the presence of the absolute. From the absolute, you get the creation of all worlds or all universes. Then below that, you get the creation of a universe or a world, and within that, the galaxies. And within that, all the stars of the galaxy or universe. And below that, you get a particular star, such as what we know of as our sun. Then below that, you get the planetary system that is attached to the star or the sun. And then below that, you get a particular planet, which in our case would be the Earth. And then below that, you get the sentient species on that planet, in our case, humanity. And the lowest level, the densest level, is more or less a kind of dead planet, which is starting to evolve, starting to grow. And these are usually the satellites going around the planets, in our case, the moon. So you have the absolute, all worlds, our universe, all stars in it, our star, the sun, our solar system, our planet, life on this planet, and finally the moon as this gradation. And like the musical scale, as you go through the octave, there's two places in the musical octave where you have an odd jump or an interval, as it's called. What Gurdjieff says is that at those intervals, the vibrations need a shock or something in between to help them jump from one gradation to the next. And so in our particular case, from the energy coming in from our solar system or our planetary system, before it reaches the Earth, our planet, it needs a shock for the planet to receive the vibrations. And that shock, according to Gurdjieff, is kind of humanity, i.e., we are a kind of buffer zone that receives energy from the solar system and helps it to jump to the Earth, like a kind of transformer. Or as I say in the essay, humanity acts as a kind of step-down transformer. The energies are coming in, humanity buffers that, transforms it, and sends it down to the Earth. So humanity is necessary as a step-down transformer or buffer zone from the energies coming in from the solar system to reach the Earth. That's our role. And we have to fulfill that role. And before we can utilize energies for our own development, which is a luxury or they're extra, primarily we have to utilize our energies in our cosmic function. Now, Gurdjieff says that in order for humanity to fulfill that role, we had to be made unaware of it, unconscious, forgetful of it. Because if we knew about how we were utilizing or redirecting our energies for this role, we may rebel and say, no, we don't want to use our energies. I want to save the energies for myself. So humanity was largely given a kind of unconscious position. But we can develop awareness to recognize that role, and then we can make a conscious choice to organize our energies and work on ourselves. So some of those energies go towards this cosmic function of step down transformer. The rest of the energies we can utilize for our own self-development and to develop our soul. And so that is largely, in a nutshell, what Gurdjieff discussed about the law of vibrations. A part of his much larger cosmology. So I play with the kind of, thought experiment about that, about how humanity itself may not be performing its role very well and may need another kind of shock to kind of nudge it into function, like a kind of machine which is winding down. It needs a nudge to wind itself up again. And perhaps some of the occurrences and events across this planet, whether catastrophe, kind of catastrophe events or man-made events or certain global disruptive events, warfares, pandemics, etc., may be utilized as shocks to trigger the human being into greater energy function. So that's one aspect I kind of, playfully consider as a thought experiment in this essay. The other one is that perhaps humanity needs to pass the baton onto another kind of role or another species that can fulfill this role so humanity can get on with other things. If we can substitute ourselves and give over to another species the notion of step down transformers, perhaps humanity then can utilize all the energies for its self-development and start, pulling themselves up by the bootstraps and getting further down the evolutionary journey that we seem to be slowing down on. So, I look at the possibility, could a kind of machinic intellect or a kind of AI form of infrastructure or artificial intelligence could be utilized to receive those energies and step them down, again, maybe unconsciously, or they may dominate that role and humanity may lose its cosmic purpose and therefore even lose its way. At all times, humanity has to serve a function, whether it's a function for the cosmos or a function for itself. So it's about sometimes being forced to serve that function or finding ways around it that we can better serve it or find substitutes. So it's kind of a thought experiment that plays with those themes and it doesn't come up with any particular conclusions, but lays it out for the reader to consider. So that's what the essay is about. And at these times, I think we are in need of thought experiments to consider from different perspectives, what may be happening and certain trajectories. But on that note, I was also considering, aside from the essay, I've used the work of Gurdjieff in this essay. And it's interesting how I think in the last 150 years or so, there's been a lot of information coming out, especially through what we may term the esoteric pathway, i.e., knowledge and information and ideas that were previously hidden or were not part of the mainstream consensus um, knowledge narratives. And that really kicked off, I think, around the mid 19th century, around the 1850s and 1840s. That's the time when the notion of spiritualism came about. And people started to experiment with seances, and people started to, for the first time, really engage with communicating with people beyond physical life, i.e., the undead or the dead, you know, undead, you're dead or you're not, physically speaking. So, um, and this is also a time where a lot of streams came public, such as theosophy. And I know theosophy is controversial because later it got corrupted. But of course, most streams get corrupted. The religious streams get corrupted later on. Doesn't mean that their original origin was corrupted. So, let's not, you know, put the cart before the horse. So we had such things as theosophy coming out for the first time, really making public the idea of hidden masters and behind the scenes maneuverings between certain groups and brotherhoods and occult groups. From that, you had anthroposophy and Rudolf Steiner, which was a stream for Christian esoteric hermeticism, following on again, from the kind of Manichaeism and Knights Templar theme and Rosicrucianism. Steiner came following that lineage. Around the same time, of course, you had Gurdjieff coming to the West, and he said it isn't necessary to bring the wisdom of the East to the science of the West. So again, combining that kind of stream of esoteric wisdom to bring it to the science of the West, to bring it public. You also had a lot of certain teachers coming from the East, bringing to the West, such as Yogananda, and you had, again, certain mysticism from Islam and Sufism, and other streams coming to the West all around that time, especially in the crossover between the 19th and the 20th century. And these streams put a lot of knowledge and information into the open domain that wasn't there before. A lot of stuff came out from Rosicrucianism also. It came out from alchemy and the mystery of the cathedrals as well. And, all this kind of material. And Rudolf Steiner was saying that a decision was made at around that time, 1850s or so, that humanity needed knowledge to come out at this time to prepare it for its future. Because a minimum or a modicum of knowledge had to be made available to enable humankind to have some structure and context, to enable it to have, assess its context for where it was going in the future. Because the future was going to be very important. There'll be some very important, significant events coming along. And if humankind was completely unconscious, then, there would be greater problems. So if we just take a kind of anthropological glance at the last 150 or 170, 180, up to 200 years, we'll see that there was great impulses being made public and great knowledge coming forth where we can have this dialogue. We can talk about vibrational gradations and the astral realm and different kind of dimensional spaces, different intelligences, different species in the cosmos, because before this was a non-conversation. So a lot has happened in the last 150 or so years to be able to bring forth this, so to give us some context to try to frame where we are right now. So it's no accident that we've had these impulses coming into the public sphere in these times to try to prepare us, although, again, they get corrupted quite easily. And around the 1950s onwards, a lot of pseudo-occult, pseudo-spiritual pathways came in to intermingle and corrupt the genuine ones and dilute them and to fragment them. And so we do need a great deal of discernment to break the chaff from the wheat. But of course, we do have knowledge. And that's why we can make these thought experiments and to consider potentials, because we have more context to do so. So, on the back of that kind of introduction, I will now leave you to get on to listen or read my own thought experiment. Is there life on Earth? Okay, cheers. Sometimes, to advance along a train of thought, it is necessary to be shaken away from the main highway and to take a different track, to receive a shock, such as in a thought experiment. This is one of those. So let us speculate upon the seeds of life and what may be the reasons or function for human life to exist on this planet. We shall begin by taking a Gurdjieffian approach on the matter. All life in the universe, it is said, exists at differing rates of vibration, and these differing rates correspond to their state of emanation or manifestation. In this, there is a chain, ray, or hierarchy in states of vibration. That is, there are gradations of existence, with all high emanations integrated or forming a part of all lower gradations. But of course, the lower gradations do not form part of the higher emanations. These vibrational energies then flow, to use a vague and imprecise term, from less dense into denser conditions. Again, a vague analogy. Yet this movement or trajectory of vibrations is not linear and inevitable. In other words, if left alone, such a movement runs into difficulties. At various stages of this vibrational flow, assistance is required. And this is where the thought experiment now takes a turn to look at life on this planet, the Earth, as we named it. The frequency emanations within this universe flow from the absolute to all other grand arrangements or systems of intelligence, galaxies, nebulae, etc. They then vibrate down to specific galaxies, such as our Milky Way, and next onto stars, such as the Sun. After the star, the vibrations emanate into the further density of planets, the planets of this solar system, before reaching specific planets that for us signifies the Earth. Finally, after the level of a singular planet, the final vibrations reach the densest state where we would find those dead or undeveloped planetoids or satellites, such as what we would call the Earth's moon. So far, so good. But not so good, as the vibrations between the level of the planetary system and this specific planet, Earth, have a problem. Rather, it can be said that there is a situation. For every problem is likewise a situation, but not every situation is necessarily a problem. And so what is this situation? Well, it's something like this. The vibrations are having a difficult time stepping down from the planetary system level to the level of the Earth. It is similar to how electricity is usually transmitted across the planet. Often, heavy voltages of electricity need to be stepped down or passed through a transformer, a step-down transformer, in order for it to be received at the other end. If the electricity leaving the power station did not pass through a step-down transformer before reaching our homes, every fuse and device in our homes would be blown and the house circuit would be fried. The same applies to the Earth. It needs some form of a step-down transformer. Welcome to the entry of organic life. When I say organic life, I am referring in this thought experiment not to all organic life, but specifically to that species which got nominated to represent the step-down transformer role. And yes, you guessed correctly, this happens to be the human species. The human being, consciously or unconsciously, and the point here is that it's mostly unconscious, functions as a transmitter of vibrations that are necessary for the evolution of the planet Earth. Humanity acts as a form of membrane across the surface of the planet and is receptive to the myriad of vibrations, emanations, and all other types of influence that are arriving to the planet from the solar environment. No wonder then that human beings act so erratically if they are the buffer, after the Earth's magnetic shielding, to receive whatever is coming in. And we must assume there is a lot coming in. And at times when the Earth's magnetic shielding is particularly diminished, such as now, there is a greater exposure to the full force of the incoming vibrations. If we are to take this thought experiment one step further, and staying with the Gurdjieffian perspective, it can be said that humans not only transmit the incoming step-down energies, but that they also produce energies of their own. After all, through our physical labors we are generating energy, are we not? Where does this energy go to? It may be that our energies are being passed along to the next level to contribute to the chain of developmental transmission. And next in line is the Earth's satellite, the Moon. And so in this context it can be said that humans, during their physical existence, are generating energies to feed the Moon. And yet almost all the step-down transformer and moon-feeding energies are generated unconsciously. Human beings are being utilized as energy transformers and generators. And what do we get out of it? Well, we get to have the experience of a physical lifetime. Fair trade-off? The question that may next get asked is, why do we need to participate in this unconsciously? Well, because it could be surmised that humans would not be willing otherwise to give away their energies. If everyone suddenly awakened to the fact that we were giving away so much potential energies, don't you think we may wish to renegotiate this position in order to preserve some energies for ourselves? And here comes the crux. Humanity can develop and evolve as a mass, yet this is slow going. This rhythm, however, is the mass speed and moves together as a collective. Yet, like any well-organized collective, there are always scouts that are sent on ahead to be pioneers and prepare the way. If you wanted to use a fancy word, you could call these the evolutionary outriders. A vibrational pattern needs to be set up, just like establishing a blueprint as a foundation for what is to come. These outriders go on ahead and work to utilize available energies, those incoming and those from self, to establish a vibrational resonance for the next phase of the developmental impulse. In order for this to occur, a few people need to make themselves available, as it were, for the accumulation of energies for this use. And this means that they are not disposed for giving their energies for the feeding of the moon. Some may say that this is not a fair or just situation, as why should a small minority of individuals get to use their energies for means other than being a step transformer buffer for the earth and as food for the moon? Well, quite simply put, not that many people are actually striving to be conscious individuals. The opportunity is there for all, so to speak, yet few are those who respond. So the only barrier to inclusion is the individual themselves. And this, it can be suspected, has always been the case. The question now to be asked in this thought experiment is this good enough? Life upon planet Earth is an experiment, let us say, and the human species is being monitored to see how it performs in its allotted role as transformers and transmitters of vibrations. What if, now that a sufficiently prolonged period of time has elapsed, it has come to the attention of the advanced intelligence monitoring the progress upon this planet that humans are, well, falling down on the job? What if humans are no longer functioning well in this role, and so a new transmitter model is required? Time is up for humanity. What form could possibly replace humanity to act as this buffer zone between the solar neighborhood and the Earth? Welcome to the rise of the machines. No great surprise here, as the planet Earth is already being terraformed to accommodate the rising technological ecosystem. Any sufficiently advanced species visiting this planet could be forgiven for thinking that a terraforming project is underway for adapting the planet Earth for a machinic intelligence, or AI form of species. The highly dense electromagnetic environment, the masts and antennas, the cameras and surveillance systems, the Wi-Fi relay stations, the profusion of low Earth orbit satellites, etc., are all established in a network, a digital architecture that could act like an AI semi-sentient global brain capable of receiving the cosmic vibrations, step transforming and retransmitting them, effectively putting humanity out of a job or a purpose. Wouldn't that be a haunting thought? Perhaps this is why there has arisen the drive towards a transhumanist future, where a machinic intelligence overtakes the two-legged, three-brained, carbon-bodied human species as the dominant player for the next phase of Earth's evolution. Yet this, however, could also indicate a new impulse to develop a sense of purpose for human life in relation to the rise of an AI architecture of intelligence. In order to retain their usefulness, a certain percentage of humanity will be compelled to develop their innate psychic abilities, to activate their latent organs of perception. Those persons incapable of turning inward will probably choose to merge with the machinic intelligence so as to perpetuate some semblance of their DNA as a recombinant element with its code, a silicon-carbon recombinant life force. This new cyborgian species would then become the new model replacement to take on the function of being an energy transformer and transmitter. Still, it seems that the transhumanist route will not be for the majority, as it is largely being peddled by an elite class of techno-nerds and bonkers billionaires. The machinic AI substitution could benefit humanity in another way. For whilst the Earth needs a transmitter membrane to fulfill its function, this requirement means that the majority of humanity needs to remain relatively unconscious to their purpose. That is, they are occupied with everything other than their inner developmental potential. But once there is an AI substitution for the job, the human workers get relieved of duty, so to speak. By having a replacement or surrogate species in this role, then humanity would be freed from this role necessity and can shift into a new stage of evolvement. The human species would be given a free run to work upon itself, to evolve and create a soul, as they say, in order to participate in the cosmic evolutionary scheme, and to be of use at a higher level in the creative hierarchy. As suggested, this could likely mean a path of development upon the psychic level as part of utilizing the faculties of an extended mind. Whilst AI and machinic intellect take on greater roles in managing and arranging affairs upon the physical plane, Human beings will be reaching out to the stars with their minds, cosmic communication with conscious intention. However, if humanity collectively fell back into a state of unconsciousness, then the advanced intelligence monitoring the progress upon this planet may decide that the experiment has failed and that the human species has entered a dead-end evolutionary pathway and, as such, are no longer required. The human experiment would be allowed to eventually die off. After all, there is now an AI substitute to keep the transformer-transmitter role operational for the planet Earth and its satellite moon. But wait there. That all sounds a bit drastic, doesn't it? I'm sure that humanity, being the immature and largely infantile species that they are, would at least be given a final chance or even a push to up its game before the machines take over. So that now brings us to the present time and the post-pandemic human condition. As part of this continuing thought experiment, we can perhaps entertain the consideration that the global pandemic of 2020-21 was a last shock to give humanity a final chance to push past a necessary threshold upon its developmental trajectory. Of course, this is just pure speculation here, a kind of mental play for the mind. Continuing with our Gurdjieffing approach on the matter, just as the octave of cosmic vibrations requires a shock-style interval to get it past a certain part of its journey, so too does humanity have a proclivity within itself whereby, at certain intervals, it becomes stuck, so to speak. And when at this juncture of stuckness or blockage, humanity requires some outside intervention to jolt it sufficiently to get it past a teetering threshold. As human civilization on this planet, at its current time, is straggling through a period of deep materialism, cultural vulgarity, and widespread psychological malaise, it seems an ideal time to receive an unexpected jolt to kickstart a new phase of developmental activity. Now, it's just a thought here, and this is only a thought experiment. Yet, wouldn't it be convenient that as the recent global pandemic began to usher in a recalibrated multipolar world order, it might also have stimulated a new phase of human evolvement within a conscious segment of the human species? This may not be the case, yet then again it also could be the case. Every non-possibility also includes its inherent contrary possibility. The question, as always, is whether anything will result from these potentials. The human species is forever in potential and never in completion. Modern human civilization has made great advancements upon the physical world stage. In terms of technology and material gains, there has been incredible progress. Yet, psychologically and in a spiritual sense, it can be said that humanity is losing pace. And this can lead to a serious predicament where the technological possibilities within our grasp are not fully aligned with a level of conscious awareness and perceptive ability to fully understand the situation before us. We are overwhelmed with information, yet we lack the comprehension and knowledge to gain an understanding of how to manage our predicament. Things could get out of hand very quickly and very easily. In such circumstances, it may be said that a jolt is very badly needed. Returning to the title of this thought experiment, Is There Life on Earth?, we may still be able to answer in the affirmative. But does this include the future state of the human being? And will it include human sentient life in the majority? Or will a machinic intelligence be the majority case and a conscious humanity a lesser percentage? In other words, if the pandemic shock was applied to be just that, a jolt for human inner development, then will the call be heeded? Perhaps it does not need to be heeded by the majority. It may all correspond to who has ears to hear and eyes to see. And in this manner, we may now close down this thought experiment, as no doubt only a few ears, and even fewer eyes, were on the page, or on the ball. An interesting and partly entertaining distraction, perhaps. Now, onwards and upwards, and let us continue with our regular way of life. That's it for now.